Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Straight Talk, sponsored by Darley and Inglis. Today, we reflect on the Inglis Classic Sale with Sebastian Hutch and trainer Calvin McEvoy, the man who signed for the sales top lot. In racing, new Racing Victoria board members, sustainability at the heart of the WA Racing Review, a Hobart Cup distance debacle, and the ATC's Championship Act is canned after 24 hours. And in wagering, Tabcorp could be moving to the B2B space with a Merman acquisition of Betmakers and the Super Bowl a big winner for prediction markets. Tim, you've been in Sydney for the large part of the week at the Inglis Classic Sale. I think that everybody in terms of Inglis would be pretty happy with how things went. Obviously strong results, good clearance. I think the third biggest aggregate for this sale on record. Look, we'll talk more specifically about the Inglis Magic Million sort of dichotomy in a minute, but I guess, there is really a sense in this market at the moment, there's some confidence from a buying perspective that they're willing to invest.
Yeah, look, so trade was up sort of 3 million year on year, which is a good result because the market still is tricky, particularly sort of probably the bottom half of what Classic operates in that, as Sebastian sort of said during the week, that 0 to 80,000 or $100,000 is still difficult. People, as we've discussed all year in the last probably 2 or 3 years, people that want to buy a share in a horse or more, uh, greater proportion of them are prepared to go, I'd rather have 5 or 10%, an expensive horse rather than, 20 and 30 and 40% of a cheaper one. And training fees have probably got something to do with that, but there's also the micro syndicators, people, few $100s and they get to race horses that are, $500,000 plus. We saw that at Magic Millions with my racehorse and spending up to 800,000, I think it was, on an Animo and different things. So the market's changed, but Classic's still able to turn over an extra 3 million year on year. And what I took out of it, that bottom end of the market, it's probably the country trainers or the smaller trainers that need to, and this will come up certainly in Tasmania, particularly Bren in a couple of weeks, is the tried horse market's easy sell, buy a horse, get to the races in, even if it's been spelling 8 to 10 weeks probably, rather than the long wait for a yearling. But you're not gonna get a good horse. There was, the trainers I know, a lot of Southern New South Wales trainers were all there buying a horse. I'll use Kim Davis as an example. A few years ago, he bought a Hellbent. Kenny Hell's a good open handicap sprinter. Then he went back and he's got Autumn Break, who was unlucky in the highway on Saturday and very promising horse. And he went back and I think he spent 70,000 on a yearling. Gratz Vella spent 80 for that hope of getting a good horse. And Gratz had a 2-year-old winner, the previous week that looks spoiled too hard. It looks quite promising. So yeah, it is. I think people are filtering back, but there's just probably not as much competition as some of the breeders would like on those horses. But I think for my reckoning, it's taken a turn back where people want to have a chance of having a good horse.
Yeah, it is interesting, I guess, from English perspective, and we talked to Sebastian Hutch, or you spoke to Sebastian Hutch, get that in a minute, but, the digital market has grown enormously in the last few years. There has to be a net effect on that, on the yearling market, and that's the nature of it. Like, you can't there's only so many horses and there's only so much investment, and yeah, it might be something I might look at in the next couple of weeks in one of my run the numbers columns, or one of those columns that we do, to actually look at that digital market and see how it actually, how it compares to what's going on. Because, as I said, it's been long discussed how the lower end of the yearling market is impacted by what goes on in the digital space with freely available tried racehorses, or even, yearlings and weanlings and other sort of racing 2-year-old racing stock at a discount. In a market which is highly competitive and harder for the smaller guys to compete, you can see why they go to those markets. But as you point out, Tim, it's not always the best result. At the other end of the market, stallions often drive a lot of the top end sort of attraction here. And Dali's Gaius has been an interesting one, because we might have thought maybe even probably 12 months ago, Tim, that maybe he was one of those stallions that had sort of been out here and made his mark, and some all right horses, but at that stage his oldest crop were only 2 and probably weren't showing. They're not fast and forward precocious horses like we used to seeing in Australia. But obviously the emergence of Observer has changed the narrative around that stallion significantly, and it wouldn't surprise to see Darley bring him back this year, given the success that he's had. He's currently top of the second season sire rankings. What was interesting, Tony Calvin McEvoy and agent Damon Gabberty missed out in a couple of Gaius early this year, but they landed the top lot of the Classic Sale, and yeah, you had a chat to Calvin about sort of this stallion and also their desire to get the top lots.
I guess you've seen some nice go-outs pretty close up there at Ballarat and, around Flemington and places like that, and good to have one in your own stable now.
Yeah, definitely. We love the stallion. He's doing very good things, isn't he? Got everyone a little bit excited. We tried to buy a few in New Zealand and unfortunately weren't strong enough, but this is a colt that, we've been really trying to piece together since I saw him Tuesday last week. So, he's just a beautiful walker, good, strong colt off a great farm with very good stats. So I knew it'd have to be strong. Didn't know it'd have to be that strong, but we're pleased to have him, and he's not fully subscribed yet, so there's certainly positions in him.
So what sort of style horse at this stage does he shape as obviously Observer on a Derby and Henry Dwyer's that, looks pretty, probably will get further, but pretty sharp as well.
Yeah, look, he looks like he's going to be a lovely 3-year-old. There's no doubt about that, but really cheers, mate. Good answer. He just had the best attitude, and I think, we haven't had many gals through the door, but I've been watching them and they seem to have great temperaments. They obviously can be there at 2, back end 2, and be getting better at 3 over multiple distances, which is what we're seeing. So he's so well bred, the stallion, and it's nice to have one.
You and your father have had a lot of success with 2-year-olds and young horses, but obviously with half yours and things like that, trying be a bit patient and train a nice stayer as well.
Yeah, look, exactly. I think it's about what you can get in the stable, and we try and buy all sorts of different styles of horses, sharp, early 2-year-olds, classic 3-year-olds. And, we bought a Derby winner from this sale. We've bought a Group 1 winning, 1,500 metre horse from this sale. So it's been a good sale to us, and we come in with a bit of confidence, and I'm pleased because he was the one horse we wanted to leave here with.
So some colours that will be, assigned to that horse already, or is it worked out?
Haven't committed colours to anyone just yet. So there's a few people that are involved and interested, but we'll just see how it all plays out over the next few hours.
And how have you found the sales season so far? As you mentioned, you had a crack in New Zealand and missed out on a couple, and Magic Millions and now Classic as well.
Yeah, look, I think it's selling down's quite difficult. Talking to a lot of trainers, it is becoming tough. We've felt that we've shopped with a lot of value all year. At Magic Millions, we basically shopped around the average and did all the hard work, and we were pleased. We had a good crack at a Night of Thunder filly, which we paid a bit of money for, and this was the next one that we opened the shoulders up at, and one we really wanted to buy. And yeah, so we're excited to have him.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it, Tim, how the market can change and the sentiment can change relatively quickly. I suppose, Gaius probably wasn't viewed as top commercial stallion, I said this time last year, but there's the opportunities you get if you back a stallion in. He was an absolute superstar racehorse and a good example of if you stick to a horse, you stick to the philosophy that good horses produce good horses, that he was a horse which probably, so where he is at the moment, it's probably not that surprising to some people, albeit the commercial market sort of seems to have cottoned onto him now. We mentioned before, Inglis are pretty pleased. Sebastian Hutch, he's a regular on this show, whether we're doing interviews with him, personal interviews with him or after the sale, speaking to him, whatever, he's getting probably more and more combative in his relationship with Magic Millions. It's probably fair to say, Tim. He's quite happy to point out some of the foibles of the opposition, which is probably something we hadn't seen in the past. But in the last couple of years, it's become apparent that the battle for market share is really strong between these two sales companies.
Yeah, and I'm piecing together, hopefully, an article. It might even be up by the time this goes out, but I'm trying to piece together an article now, sort of touching on that. And it is, as I've sort of half written, it's a delicate balance for these sales companies. And Sebastian, rightly, they've had a good few years. Sort of Easter's been positive, and certainly the chairman sales and different things. As I said, Classic's been up year on year, and Premier was outstanding last year. To drive really hammer home in comparison to Magic Millions, and he's been very direct about that. But it's also not that simple, I don't think, for Magic Millions. January is clearly their main sale, obviously, and it's a balance. It may be a victim of its own success a bit like Easter, where median's 200,000. That's a lot of money. Average sort of closer to 250 or 280 at times. it's a victim of its own success, and people go, "Well, I'm not going there because it's too hard." And again, that bottom end of the market is difficult even at that level. So they cut back their book one catalogue by 40 lots, and they had sort of a higher number of withdrawals. And Sebastian was clearly pointing out that the amount of the gross turnover, which is what they get paid on, sales commissions, fair enough. But I don't think it's that simple. They could catalogue more horses, certainly in book one, and then, maybe upset the clearance rate falls. Just up, it's a really fine balance of keeping vendors happy, because they're quite often, they're always looking for someone else to blame if their horse doesn't reach their expectations or they have to take it home. Look, some of those horses probably have ended up at Easter that Magic's clearly would have wanted. I mean, that's just probably a fact of Easter being successful the last couple of years. And if Easter falls a little bit flat, people feel they got left behind in that bottom quartile. Maybe that swings back to Magic's the year after. It's just the way it works. It's up and down. And Sebastian's in the box seat at the moment, and good luck to him.
Yeah, and it's certainly, it's part of it. I think, like I don't want to get too much into personal insights here, but I think the disappointment of 2020, when it was not long after Sebastian Hutch had gone to Inglis and taken over the role, that Inglis was really, basically kicked in the teeth by COVID. That Magic Millions got to run their sale without interruption. Inglis's Easter sale was completely split apart. It caused all sorts of issues and probably took a little while to sort of piece those back together. I think there's a little bit of, drive from that period that's driving this competitiveness between the auction companies. But I do know one thing: Barry Bowditch and Jerry Harvey aren't looking to Sebastian Hutch to determine what their strategy will be going forward. And there's no doubt there's a bit of game playing here. It's a bit like the old football coaches. And as journalists, we love this stuff. And it's good to have that honesty. It's good to have this, we don't mention each other in advertising sort of stuff. Well, that seems to have gone out the window. It is a competitive landscape, and we believe in the importance of competition. But anyway, here's Sebastian's review of the sale. Yeah, you had a good chat to him, about 5 or so minutes, talking through, I guess, the details of the sale, what worked, what didn't, and the overall landscape.
Sebastian, by my quick arithmetic, it's the third best Inglis Classic Sale in history, certainly in terms of turnover. I know there's a lot of other factors that can go into that, but at the moment you must be satisfied and probably met your expectations, perhaps.
Yeah, very pleased. We wanted the sale to be up. Like, we felt like we were in a position to have a better sale than what we had 12 months ago. But it is satisfying to sit here and have the gross be up, the clearance be up, the average be up, the median be up. Everything is up. So that's pleasing. And I mean, I don't think there's any disguising the fact that there are challenges in the market, particularly in what you'd call the value range of 0 to 100 or 0 to 80. Like, it's tricky there. But the appetite for what are perceived to be the really desirable horses seem to be pretty ferocious right the way through the sale. We're going to clear 84%, I think, or 83%, and that's before we get stuck into past in lots. Like, it's very good clearance. I know clearance has been a concern for people through certainly in the prelude to the sale season. Clearance was a concern for people, particularly in the part of the market that this sale predominantly occupies. And so to sit here and be clearing 84% with the prospect of that getting higher is pleasing.
Speaking to Calvin McEvoy, who bought the top lot today, that even he admitted and said, talking to his training peers, that it is still hard to sell down horses, but they're finding, for what you're hearing, and probably will be evident when these yearlings are paid off in the next few months, that the more expensive horses or better credentialed horses perhaps are easier to sell than that lower end.
Yeah, we hear that a little bit, but for every example, one way there's a contradictory example the other way. Look, I think certainly from the point of view of the trainers, they want to be racing the best stock that they possibly can. And typically that stock is the most sought after stock, and you've got to pay more for it. In the case of that particular horse, Tony and Calvin have had huge success buying out of this sale for a number of years. V8 was a Group 1 winning colt, where they won an Oaks or a Derby with Coco Sun. I mean, they're just two of the good horses they bought out of the sale, but they've consistently bought good horses out of this sale, and they conscientiously targeted. And yeah, hopefully they can be toasting more good horses in years to come.
How does this sale set you up for the rest of the season? Obviously, Premier next, and then, of course, Easter.
I think really well. none of you will report it, but the first sale of the year was down 5.1 million in terms of turnover. And so to sit here and be up, to be up 3 odd million is pleasing. But it's not easy to make happen. Like, yeah, it's all very theoretically, you want certain things to work out certain ways, but huge number of moving parts to the mechanics of a sale. So for it to come together and deliver a set of results that reflect an improvement year on year is satisfying. And I mean, I've said this at the release of each catalogue, but the fact that we ran good sales in 2025 gave us good momentum into the spring. So when we were on farms through the end of July, all of August and September, talking about the English Sale Series for 2026, there was very positive sentiment towards the sale series as a whole. Certainly that's borne out to some extent by the results here, but I think if my expectations are right, it'll be borne out more so at Premier, where it just feels like we have an improved catalogue, certainly in terms of quality, and we have a very good catalogue going to Easter. I mean, better catalogues bring greater expectation on the part of vendors, so that's a challenge to manage as well. And that was a factor in some instances here, but I think we have a good catalogue of yearlings for Premier, and we have a very good catalogue of yearlings for Easter. And I think that's something people have been aware of prior to Christmas. I think people were very aware going through the Premier catalogue. It looked like a good book. And people have been aware of the fact that the Easter book was going to be very good. And hopefully we can generate good engagement, good participation, and ultimately good results for the people who've been willing to support us.
Not defending Magic Millions, but they did run a smaller catalogue, and perhaps that was to boost clearance, because that does, no breeder or vendor wants to take horses home necessarily. So they, it's a fine balance, even so, sacrificing turnover perhaps.
Well, we've provided a market for the same number of people we provided a market for 12 months ago and delivered a better market. So I'm happy with how we're going.
Yeah, so that's a wrap on Classic Sale for 2026, Tim. It was a positive sale. Look, I mean, sometimes you've got to look between the rhetoric and the marketing messages and whatever else. Like, that's our job as analysts and journos to actually have a look at these things. And, I think as the market sits at the moment, regardless, it's a pretty steady, strong bloodstock market at the moment. I think that's probably a good sign for the industry as a whole. A couple of other small highlights in the bloodstock space. Obviously, Classic's been dominating, but there's a story there in the week. Obviously, Snitzel had the winner of the English Millennium on the weekend. He's now back to the top of the Australian size table. It seems a while since, I think it was 2019-20, since he actually won the fourth of his size table, but size titles. But it's interesting to see him back on top there. And, of course, the Autumn Sun currently second. So, Sons of Reduced Choice first and second. Now, we haven't had a Quinella from the same sire family since Fastnet Rock and Exceed and Excel, I think, in 2014-15, Tim. So, but it is interesting to see. And, I mean, that domination of Redute's, like, his influence is enormous. Even if we consider that the third horse of the table, Zoostar, is a out of the Redute's Choice mare.
Yeah, and the Autumn Sun, if he's possibly going to, claim he's first, this would be the Autumn will dictate that mostly through Autumn Glow, most likely, and she resumes on Saturday. If she can go through and continue her unbeaten record and probably get to the Queen Elizabeth or something like that with, I think it's $5 million race, that will go a long way, whether he can, maintain sort of second and certainly possibly win it for the first time.
Yeah, and if you look at actually the Autumn Suns and Snitzel's records at the same times of their career, I think both have got 10 stakes winners at this point of their career, but the Autumn Sun has more Group 1 winners, so that's interesting in itself. The other one I'll mention too in terms of Sons of Reduced Choices, I wrote an article a few weeks ago, just having a look back at the books that Alabama Express has got, another Son of Reduced Choice, at Yulong over the last few years. Oh, my word. It's hard to see that a stallion has had a better book, especially a young stallion has had a better book than what Alabama Express has had. So if we believe that good horses produce good horses, then we might be in a situation where, the Autumn Sun's challenger in the sort of, years to come might come from another Son of Reduced. The following segment is brought to you by Darley. Darley's sires performed extremely well at the Inglis Classic Sale. Progeny of Too Darn Hot averaged over $200,000, while Gaia topped the sale with his star colt, which fetched $625,000. The second top lot at $540,000 was by Harry Angel, who, along with Pinatubo, featured among the top stallions on gross. While first season sensation Animo was also very well received. It continues a very strong start to the yearling season for Darley Stallions. By Darley in 2026. All right, Tim, let's switch to racing now. And interesting to see how Racing Victoria late on a Friday. They they love these, well, because the government release, they love these late Friday releases. Peter Duncan and Jonathan Hardwick added to the Racing Victoria board. Now, this is the first time, I think it's the first time in mid-2023, so what's that, almost 3 years, 2.5 years, that Racing Victoria's had a full contingent on its board. Peter Duncan, a really interesting addition there. She's a former greyhound on the greyhound board of GRV. Quite, yeah, quite, I guess, outspoken is probably one way to put it. She has strong opinions, not scared to talk about it. She's very well credentialed in the space. It'd be interesting to see how she goes. I know less about Jonathan Hardwick, but it's interesting how Racing Victoria now building up that board to have a bit more depth and diversity about it in terms of the skill set that's behind it, and probably puts them in a stronger position going forward.
Bren, were at that back in the Hunt conference in last September in Melbourne, and Peter Duncan was a guest speaker there, and won't obviously repeat exactly what she said or anything like that. I don't think we're allowed to on the conventions, but she had some very forthright views about animal welfare and, I guess, fighting back against the antis, nup to the cup and things like that. So be interesting on the RV board, her views as opposed to maybe some others on that committee and fellow directors of how they tackle, I guess, perception of the industry and the social license and all those sort of things, given her experience at Greyhound Racing Victoria and the problems that industry's had, in New Zealand, Tasmania, certainly New South Wales and right through really, what she brings to that and that understanding of that and trying to, keep government on side and I guess, maintain that so-called social license.
Yeah, and from what I'm hearing in the background, Tim, I think there was definitely some political lobbying that went on to try to get certain people on the board, which often happens in those situations. And it'd be interesting to see how that plays out moving forward. We know Victorian racing politics is always a dynamic environment. There's always plenty going on. Speaking of interesting environments, WA. Obviously, RA was coming under very much under focus as part of this review. The details of the review or the terms of reference of that review from the Cook government was released this week. The future financial sustainability and governance of racing and wagering WA was firmly on the sights of the review. There's basically a whole bunch of things that people who want to make submissions are asked to look at. Look, there's some significant challenges over there, and I guess the model of having your state operated bookmaker and your PRA, Trico PRA, all integrated within the one operation does have some advantages, but it's clear from what sort of come out from this discussions around the view team that there's probably some disadvantages as well.
That's right, and the RA probably has been, as you say, disadvantaged or the uncertainty. The government's looked at selling the tote multiple times over quite an extended period now, and it's never got off the ground for whatever reason. Or there was not enough money, and then COVID hit. I think lots of different reasons why they haven't been able to privatise the tote, and that probably has hamstrung RAWA in terms of investment and just trying to, as New Zealand found as well, trying to keep up with the other corporates and investment in technology and marketing and different things like that. Probably not having the customer bases like a sports bet to be able to do that and market nationally. It'd seem, I'm sure I don't know what their breakdown of eastern states account holders would be, but I'd say to be minuscule in comparison to just trying to tap into to Western Australia. It would be quite difficult, and that would hurt the bottom line.
Yeah, and you're trying to compete against, you said you're trying to compete against 196 bookmakers in Australia, online bookmakers in Australia. You're another one. You might have opportunities within WA, but that's a challenge. But, there's some other broader challenges around venues and how things are being prioritised. Look, that similar to the review in Queensland that we saw last year. It'll be fascinating to see what comes out of that. In my home state of Tasmania, Tim, I was sitting there on Sunday watching the Hobart Cup, thrilling finish, Blonde Star getting home. Great result for the local trainers who probably had a relatively tough week. And as it turns out, we weren't running over 2,400 metres. We're running over 2,367 metres, apparently. 63 metres, sorry. They got the distance wrong. Look, Tas Racing, to their credit, put their hand up and said, yep, this has happened. We're going to have an investigation. We're going to have a look into. If you look at where the barriers are positioned from the replay last year to this year, you can see a difference. It doesn't look like 40 metres to me, but, I haven't done the tape measure out, but Come on, Tim. It's 2026. This stuff shouldn't be happening. I mean, it happens in UK racing a lot. It happens in Australian racing probably more often than we know, but it's a Group 3 race. It's Tasmania's, if not its biggest race, certainly its equal biggest race. I'd like to think maybe they would work out where the barriers are going to be.
Yeah, it is. As I said, no one's done it deliberately, but it's unfortunate that it happened full stop. But the fact that it was their signature race and got found out, and trainer of Distant Award, Peter Luttrell, isn't it? And rightly a bit upset about it. The horse was storming home. Would have made it a difference, maybe on face value, but maybe the jockey should have got going a bit earlier. Who knows? It's just one of those things. I think, unfortunately, just have to accept the result, pay on the winning post, and that's it. And hopefully, it doesn't happen again. There's protocols put in place to ensure that, as I said, it doesn't happen again.
I was watching a video yesterday of a jumps race. I think it was in Ireland on the weekend, Tim, or over the last couple of days, where it was a like bog heavy track, and the leading jockey or the jockey on the winner who went to the front, he ran out onto the synthetic track because there was no fence between him and the synthetic track, and ran along the synthetic track for like 200, 300 metres to save so there's all bunches of ways you can win a race, and they said it's not against the rules, so you can do it. So it's funny how these things can work out. Anyway, it feels like Tas Racing can't really take a break at the moment, and you'd hope that out of this comes a bit more clarity around how they do things. They don't race many 2,400 metre races at Elwick, and the track record was broken, but I'm sure that won't stand given Blonde Star ran 40-odd metres less than the previous record holder, but we'll see what pans out of that. And speaking of debacles, Tim, and I mean, Kelly Holiday, I do not profess to know much about Kelly Holiday or his partner or where things sit or whatever, but oh my God, the ATC, who are under pressure enough at the moment, this looks to be just an absolute own goal for them. They appointed an artist to play after the first day of the championships. Within 24 hours, the booking's been cancelled, whether it was on the initiative of the ATC, given the backlash around the anti-racing sentiments of the partner of Kelly Holiday, or whether it's on the artist themselves going, I don't know, but oh my God, like it didn't take much of a Google to work this out. Like, with all due respect to Ben Scarf, when Ben Scarf's pointing out hypocrisy, you're in a bit of strife.
Yeah, indeed. I don't know Kelly Holiday much either, but those concerts after the last races at the carnivals have proven popular. It does get people along with their punters is another thing, but still it does get people to the course. And as we know, ATC, need to monetize their venues outside just racing. So I absolutely understand it. And look, if I was booking, would have I known the background and who he was dating? And probably not. I guess you could Google, these days, nothing, you can say something 5 years ago and it'll come up and people remember, and social media finds you out. That's what happened. I'd say, it is embarrassing, but the right decision's probably been made that he stepped away and won't be performing. They can find someone else. It's not on the eve of it's not like 2 days before the grand final, for instance, or something. They can find an alternative. Maybe run with any publicity is good publicity sort of thing. But anyway, whoever made the decision will do a bit more due diligence next time, put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just as a bit of an aside and an old man remark, I'm not too sure about, I could see you pay enormous amount of money for artists or whatever else, but I was standing down the lawn at the Hobart Cup on Sunday after the thing, and it was a local DJ, just playing some tunes, and everybody's having a great time or whatever else. I'm not too sure anybody was name checking who the DJ was or whatever, but I was standing next to a relatively senior wagering executive who said, "How good's this?" He goes, "Racing's great like this. We need to embrace this a bit more." And I think that's great. I'm not too sure whether the celebrity element adds to it or whatever else may be attractive for people to races, but I don't think the good folks at Elwick on Sunday really gave a hoot. They'd had a few drinks. They'd wanted to have a bit of a dance. Everybody said they're having a good time, and perhaps racing could simplify some of those things. But anyway, that's probably an old man comment. I'll leave that alone for now. Moving on to wagering now, Tim, and Tabcorp making a move on Betmakers. Well, reportedly, this was reported in the Australian Financial Review this week. Betmakers went into a trading halt. Probably going to learn today what that trading halt means. It could be a takeover by Tabcorp. Interesting move if it is. Probably the biggest move in the Gil McLachlan era. Betmakers market cap's currently around $250 million. Obviously, we've spoken a bit about Gil McLachlan sort of repairing things at Tabcorp and working through things. Now got a market cap of over $2 billion. Share price has doubled since the rebound, since Gil's been in charge. Yeah, it's an interesting one from this perspective. Obviously, they've got a whole bunch of products. Betmakers are mainly B2B, I suppose, in that space. They operate providing technology products for each other, for other people on the market. One of those includes a global tote product, which is kind of interesting from the perspective of where Tab sits and whether they see value in that. Tab have got their half-yearly announcement in a couple of weeks. It'd be interesting to see what comes out of that. We'll endeavour to get a chat with someone from Tab around that. But interesting spaces. They've also copped a $150,000 fine this morning from ACMA for breaching live play and betting laws. Tabcorp. So yeah, I think Gill's learning that it's a dynamic and busy environment, the wagering space. If you don't move, Tim, you're standing still, then you're going backwards, aren't you?
Well, it's probably just like punting. You're hero 1 minute and, you've done your money the next. It's just up and down, just trying to keep your head above water. What I think's interesting, if this goes ahead, is, this obviously Betmakers do the trading and manage a lot of the white label corporate bookies. If there's, as we say, there's probably 100 plus now. They don't have the whole market, but they've got a lot of them. Whether those corporates are sort of would be happy that Tabcorp has access to that information and data and potentially customer information, and whether that helps the other providers like the Punters, Techs, and a few others out there that also sort of compete in that space. Whether we see a change in dynamic there, I guess maybe that's not why they're buying it. That's maybe, as you say, the global tote and things like that might be of more appeal, and possibly the trading tools and stuff like that they could maybe cut costs internally. Yeah, as you say, it'd be very interesting once the announcement's made to see what is actually playing out and what they intend to do.
Yeah, it's all conjecture at the moment. We don't know whether it's true or not. But there's the Jungle Drums are betting for that one, and it would be an interesting space. The other one is you talk about the dynamic nature of the wagering environment. Probably a couple of years ago on Super Bowl day, when we were saying how big the American wagering industry was going and how FanDuel and DraftKings were dominating, and it was Super Bowl's obviously the peak of the American gambling season. Fascinating this year that Kalshi surpassed, which is a prediction market platform, surpassed $1 billion in trading on the Super Bowl. That's prediction market, polling markets also had a big time as well, big growth as well. I think 2,700% growth year on year for Kelshi. There's an article up in the Straight. I urge you to read it about this prediction market space, and I don't. It's probably not somebody getting into the nuances here, but the fact that it has created a whole sort of different way of approaching betting in America, and it's a very American sort of trading mentality, but whereby like $100 million of that $1 billion was spent on what Bad Bunny's first song would be at the halftime, halftime of the Super Bowl. And there's all sorts of other things. There's also questions around what constitutes insider trading, because you can pretty much bet on anything. I mean, this is I remember when Betfair came out 15 years ago, and everybody was 20 years ago now, and everybody was saying, oh, this is what's going to happen, and all these things are going to happen. And none of those things really eventuate, especially with Betfair in Australia, in terms of people being able to lay results and whatever else. But the good old US of A, they do a Wild West environment better than most other people, given they probably invented the Wild West. And it's I don't want to use a word that I think is overused these days, but it's a bit wild what's going on there. The fact you can bet one result and lay it on another result, and all the things that can go on. There's a whole bunch of examples in that article. I urge you to check it out. But it'd be interesting to see whether that prediction market actually will have applications in Australia. At the moment, it's technically ruled illegal under both ASIC and ACMA, but these are big companies, and if they see opportunities in the Australian market, they'll look to push into it. So I'm not too sure if you or I want to be getting to that space, Tim. I don't know if Wagga on a Wednesday or Hobart on a Sunday will be a place for the prediction markets, but always interested to see new developments, isn't it?
Well, Bren, it's just hard enough to get on these days. You sit at the pub and the power goes out just before you've got a good thing and a wad of cash to get on, and the power goes out at the pub at the Warwick on Saturday before the Classic Sale. Some people are born unlucky, and I think that's me. Anyway, of course the horse won, but anyway, play on. That's the game. Things go wrong. You try to bet in cash, and anyway, I'll get over it. Move on. But that's my rant for the week.
If we're on social media, it'd be put forward as a conspiracy. Tabcorp trying to bring down the T-Row, train of betting investment. Thanks for joining us on Straight Talk, brought to you by our fabulous sponsors, Darling Inglis. Don't forget to give us a rating wherever you're listening to our podcast, and be sure to subscribe. Send us an email at editor@thestraight.com.au. Let us know what you want us to talk about, and don't forget, please become a subscriber of The Straight. Currently $19 a month, $199 a year. Well worth your investment to access all our quality articles that Tim, I, Warwick, and all the others create in order for you to read. And we'll talk to you again next week, and thanks for your time.